Reading 33 of this book for the 2018 CFAI test. Evaluating portfolio performance. Performance evaluation is as important as it is challenging. Decisions reached concerning manager skill can have effect the attainment of investment objectives. It therefore benefits investors and their advisors to be up to date in their knowledge of this field. From the fund sponsor's perspective, performance evaluation serves as a feedback mechanism to a fund's investment policy. It identifies strengths and weaknesses, attributes, results to key decisions, and focuses attention on poor performance. It provides evidence to fund trustees on whether the investment program is being conducted effectively. From the investment manager's perspective, performance evaluation permits an investigation of the effectiveness of various elements of the investment process and the contributions of those elements to investment results. Performance evaluation is composed of three parts: performance measurement, 1, number 2, performance attribution, number 3, performance appraisal. The rate of return on an asset is typically defined as the investment-related growth in an asset's value over an evaluation period. When there are intra-period cash flows, the rate of return can be measured as the growth rate applied to a single dollar invested at the start of the period, which is time-weighted rate of return, or TWR, or can be measured to an average amount of dollars invested over the evaluation period, the money-weighted rate of return, or MWR. The MWR is sensitive to the size and timing of cash flows. But the TWR is not sensitive to that. Because investment managers rarely have control over the size and timing of cash flows, the TWR is the most commonly used performance measure. When the investment manager has control over the size and timing of cash flows, the MWR may be an appropriate performance measure. When the MWR is calculated over a reasonably frequent period of time, and those returns are chain linked together over the entire valuation period, which could be any length of time, an approximation of the TWR for the period called linked internal rate of return is observed, also called the LIRR. If external managers are added to an account prior to a period of strong performance, the MWR will give a higher rate of return than the TWR. If a large amount is withdrawn prior to a period of strong performance, the MWR will yield a lower rate of return than the TWR. The opposite effect is experienced during periods of weaknesses. Data quality is important in determining the accuracy of rates of return. Rate of return for large cap securities are likely to be more accurate than those for illiquid and infrequently priced assets. A valid benchmark should meet the following criteria. It should be unambiguous, investable, measurable, and appropriate for the manager's style and area of expertise. It should reflect current investment opinions, be specified in advance, and exhibit ownership by the investment manager. So the valid benchmark, the acronym could be rearranged to the word SAMURAI for style, area of expertise, measurable, unambiguous, reflecting current opinions, specified in advance, and investable. The types of benchmarks in common use are absolute return benchmarks, manager universes, broad market indexes, style indexes, factor model-based, returns-based, and custom security-based. A custom security benchmark meets all the fundamental and quality benchmark criteria, making it appropriate for the benchmark to use. The median manager or median fund, though, is intuitively appealing at looking at performance. While it's intuitively appealing to look at the median fund and see if you beat that, this lacks the following desirable benchmark characteristics. It's not specified in advance, it's not investable, and it cannot serve as a passive investment. There's no way you'd know in advance who the median fund was going to be, or you could just buy that fund. Steps in creating a custom security benchmark are: 1. Identify prominent aspects of a manager's investment process. 2. Select securities consistent with that investment process. 3. Devise a weighting scheme for the benchmark securities. 4. Include a cash position. Review preliminary benchmark and make modifications, and then rebalance benchmark on a predetermined schedule. Good benchmark should generally display the following characteristics: minimal systematic bias between the account and the bench, less tracking error of the account relative to the bench when compared to alternatives, strong correspondence between the manager's universe of potential securities and the benchmark, low turnover. When the factor model is used as a bench, an analysis of past portfolios gives a sense of typical exposures, or betas, to various systematic sources of return. A normal portfolio is one where the factor sensitivities are set to the normal betas. Performance attribution compares account and benchmark performance and identifies the quantities and quantifies sources of differential returns. It requires an appropriate framework for decomposing an account's returns relative to those of the bench. A manager has two basic avenues for superior performance relative to the bench: selecting superior performances and owning superior assets in greater proportion than held in the bench. The inverse would be true here. Performance attribution conducted at the fund sponsor level is called macro attribution. Macro attribution has three sets of inputs. 1. Policy allocations to the asset categories within the fund and to any individual manager within the categories. 2. Benchmark portfolio returns. 3. Account returns, valuations, and external cash flows. Several decision-making levels can be of interest when evaluating a fund sponsor's decision-making process. These decision levels include net contributions, the risk-free asset categories, investment style, investment managers, and allocation effects. Micro-attribution is concerned with the investment results of the individual portfolios rather than the entire fund. Over a given period, the difference between the portfolio return and the bench is the manager's value-added return, or active return. Because security by security micro-attribution is unwieldy, a more productive method uses a factor model of the returns to assign a value-added return to sources of systematic returns. The common stock manager's value-added can be expressed as the difference between the weighted average return on the economic industry sectors in the portfolio and in the bench. This value-added return can be further divided into 1. A pure sector allocation component, 2. Within sector selection component, 3. Allocation selection interaction. For common stocks, fundamental factors such as company size, industry, and growth characteristics seem to have systematic impact on the account performance. These factors can be combined with economic sector factors to conduct micro-attribution. Fixed income portfolio returns may be decomposed to show the contributions from the external interest rate environment on one hand and the management effect on the other. The widely accepted tenet that investors are risk-averse leads to risk-adjusted performance appraisal methods, which compare returns with an account's corresponding risk. The two types of risk measures are typically used. 1. The account's systematic risk, or beta, and 2. The account's standard deviation of return. There are several measures of the return relative to the risk. The ex post alpha measures the account's excess return over the risk-free rate relative to the excess return of the market proxy over the risk-free rate scaled by the account's beta. The intercept, or the alpha, from the existing regression is a measure of the manager's skill. The trainer method measure is similar to the ex post alpha measure and will always give the same assessment of investment skill. It is the account's average return less the average risk-free rate divided by the account's beta. So trainer, like Megan Trainer, has to do with the beta, or the base. Unlike ex post alpha and trainer measures, which compare returns on an account relative to its systematic risk, the Sharpe ratio measures returns relative to the account's standard deviation of returns. The Sharpe ratio is an account's average return less the average risk-free rate divided by the account's standard deviation. The M2 measure is equal to the Sharpe measure multiplied by the standard deviation of the market index and then added to the average risk-free rate. The Sharpe ratio can be generalized to directly compare to the performance of an account of that specific bench. In general form, the Sharpe ratio is called the information ratio. In this general form, the Sharpe ratio is called the information ratio and is defined as the excess return of the account over the bench divided by the standard deviation of excess returns. Roles critique is a major issue when using methods based on CAPM to evaluate performance. Slight changes in the market portfolio surrogate can yield significantly different performance appraisal answers. Quality control charts are an effective way of illustrating a portfolio performance appraisal data. In simple terms, a quality control chart plots the portfolio manager's performance over time relative to the bench with a statistically derived confidence band. The confidence band indicates whether the manager's performance was statistically different from that of the bench. Fund sponsors adopt manager continuation policies, MCPs, to guide their manager evaluation. An MCP seeks to develop consistent procedures designed to retain good managers and remove inferior ones based on quant and qualitative information. If we begin with the null hypothesis that all managers under valuation are zero value-adding managers, i.e. they have no investment skill, our goal is to identify and separate positive value managers from those without skill. The two types of errors can occur. A type 1 error results when we keep or hire a manager that does not in fact have any skill. A type 2 error causes us to reject the null hypothesis when it is incorrect, thus firing or not hiring skillful managers. So type 1, keep or hire managers that have no skill. Type 2, fire or fail to hire skillful managers.